Form A. Form A is the applicant information tab. So if you are a lead grantee applying for funding, you will be collecting, this will be information on your agency at the top here. The name of your agency, counties served, the contact person for the application, some different roles we would like information on, application type, and then if you are familiar with the CHG application, this is all, the top part has been in the application, but the bottom part is all new. So this is where we get into, there's a whole, let's see, I don't know how many sections there are, but there's different sections of questions: strategic investments, organizational capacity, some audit information. I think there might be one more that I maybe scrolled. Yeah, I missed one. So there was another one called crisis response system. And then I also wanted to show you down at the bottom that there are, if you are a local government applicant, there are some questions directed specifically for you. And then if you are a nonprofit, these are specifically for you. So let's just go back up to strategic investments. I'm not going to go through all of the questions. If at any time, if you are filling these out and you have questions, please feel free to email your or reach out to your program manager. I think the only question that ties to another tab is really looking at your strategic investments, because this is talking about how you are proposing to spend the CHG and ESG funding. So when you are filling these out, we're wanting to know a little bit more about how you're going to use the money, and that is based on some of these projects that you're proposing to spend the funding on. Are there any questions on Form A before I move on to Form B? I'm going to move on to Form B. Form B is for subgrantee information. It's very basic. It just has basically the information collected on each subgrantee. We would like one of these for each subgrantee. So you would need to copy this tab and create one for each subgrantee. Pretty basic. There's some questions, additional questions here about subgrantee selection. Pretty basic. I'm going to move on to Form C, the proposed projects. This is where we're asking you to identify what projects you are planning to administer with the funding in this application. In column A, you would identify who the agency is. Could be you as a lead or the subgrantee's name. You would identify the type of intervention, and this is by HMIS project type, and there's a drop down for you. I'm just going to click a few of these because when we come to the next form, it might help Emily. She's going to demonstrate how this form actually ties to Form D based on what you put in Form C.
Do you want to mention if they don't have
I will. I will. And then project name is what you call it, but then project in column D is what the project name is in HMIS. So sometimes these names don't line up, and sometimes they do. So it just helps us if you call something in your community one thing, but HMIS says another. It helps us align that project. And if it's a new project, please let us know if it needs to be set up in HMIS or not. And then we're also asking if this project is a low barrier project. If you would like to read what we mean by the definition of low barrier, we have it down here at the bottom. And we are asking this question because we, with the new policy memo that was sent out, you probably received it either yesterday or today, having people identify access to housing. And this will help us know whether or not you have some low barrier projects in your community. And it's just informational gathering at this point. In July of 2018, it will be required. But at this point, we're just trying to get a lay of the land of what's going on in your community. And if you're not using CHG or ESG funding, you have an option to identify where in your system you have that option. Okay, going back to the top, in G, what is the population to be served? And we have some drop down. And then in H, please identify how many households will be served in this project in a 12-month period. And that is for how many households will be served with all funding for that project. So not just CHG funded people, but how many people with all funding for that project. And if you are a lead grantee, like I know I have some, and I'm sure there's going to be quite a few, if you are a lead that's not going to have all of your sub-grantees identified in time for the application when it's due, what we're going to ask you to do is to identify the intervention types that you believe you'll be funding. So just how I've checked a few here, if your RFP process in your community, you've decided that you will be serving emergency shelter and rapid rehousing, check that there, because then when we go over to the performance measures tab, it's going to fill in your, it's going to let you know what performance measures you need to work on. So I hope that was clear.
We've got some questions. Yeah, let's take those.
So there was a question about clarifying, do you need to copy Form B for each subrecipient?
Yes. So we need a tab for each subrecipient. You should be able to copy the tab and create another tab within the workbook.
Do we need to expend the funds evenly over the whole 24-month period, or can we do less in one period and more over a different period?
We don't dictate how you spend your funding. So if you are planning on spreading it out over the contract period, that's fine. We've never told grantees how at the rate of spending. We've never.
So, I mean, we do monitor it,
We
though,
do.
And there are, you know, situations where, and I think we're about to check in with people. If you
aren't spending enough.
If your uneven spending plan is to spend not a lot in the beginning and a lot at the end, you probably want to check in with your program manager about that so we know what's going on and so we don't try to reallocate those funds to someone that's running out of money. But we don't have a specific requirement.
Okay, so this is a question about the proposed projects tab. So if TANF is the population to be served, is that mean the project is serving 100% TANF enrolled, or could it be families, whether they're on TANF or not?
We have a TANF set aside, so that would be for a project that's mostly serving TANF families. Because we need to be able to estimate the set aside money.
Just a second, let me read this.
And to go back to what Jessica was saying about if you don't know your subs, and we're asking if you can just at least put the project type, any other information you have, if you know you're planning to do a low barrier family shelter or a rapid rehousing program for HEN, you know, put all the information that you do have even if it's not finalized with your subs, and that'll help us a lot.
So there's another question about the TANF set aside. Population to be served only allows us to identify one option, and many of our programs will be both general and TANF enrolled. Do we add them to the list twice or choose only one option? And these are really good questions because I don't think you're not required to have a separate TANF HMIS program. So
do your best
good
here.
catch, guys.
Yeah.
We're going to have to provide some guidance on that. I guess, I don't know, what do you think? I think if it's some TANF, just put the drop-down TANF enrolled and put a note. Is there a, in maybe the,
I don't think we can.
oh, I can't.
Or if there's space down here, you maybe could.
Or they could add it as a separate line, but then just put the same HMIS program or the same program name or something.
I think what we don't need to see is the same project listed twice on this form. Is that true?
I don't know.
Yeah. Good question.
I would say follow up with your program manager.
I don't think there's any wrong way to do this, so don't get, obviously we found a little glitch that's not going to work for everybody, so don't get too hung up on it. Do your best, and it's just really to help us identify some of the projects. So there's no wrong answer. No right answer, no wrong answer. Is there any more questions?
Can we add more sub-grantees later?
Absolutely. Yep.
There's a question about performance benchmarks, but I think I'll wait until we get to that section to answer that. There was also a question about the difference between CHG and ESG, and Nick, the ESG program manager, will be back on the call, so we will address that question when he's back on. Okay. How do you add new sub-grantees? Would you need to submit a new application?
You can copy, so you can copy the tab. So it's a tab in the workbook, and you should be able to copy, like a right-click, copy, click on the sub-grantee information one, and say OK. Oh, and it might be at the end. No. Let me try it again. Oh, there, sorry, forgot.
And now it's at the end.
Have to click the box.
If you already
They're telling you you didn't click copy.
Oh, thank you.
People are talking about it.
Okay, there you go. See how there's two now? And you can rename these. You should be able to rename. If you want to. It would help us. Probably help you too. If you wanted to rename it by the subgrantee's name, that'd be great.
And if you needed to submit other subgrantees after you already turned in the application, you wouldn't need a whole new application.
No, just this sheet.
Just this tab.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
All right, are we ready to move on?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, Emily.
Okay. Okay, hi, this is Emily. So I'm going to go back to the proposed projects. So in here you choose your intervention types, like Jessica had already showed you. And it's important that this be filled in even if you don't have your subgrantees, because on Form D, it will help you fill out this form. So the proposed project types that I selected on that table have highlighted things I need to do in blue on the Form D Performance Measure tab. So I'm going to scroll up here. So this is for, whoop, not all the way up to the top. So the first two questions on this form will help you determine if you need to complete the rest of it. So the first question is, has your homeless crisis response system adopted HEARTH system performance measures with benchmarks? So in some counties, they have already established that there are system-wide performance measures and they're documented and have been in use. So if that's the case, you would say yes, and then you would attach your performance measures and benchmarks to the application when you return it. And you would also continue to question 2, which is, are these performance measures in your subgrants? So if yes, please attach the contract template or sample language. So if you answer no to the first question and you do not have system performance measures in your community that are established, then you're going to go ahead and fill out the table at the bottom of the sheet. And there's a lot of information up here to help you, and your program manager is also available to help you if you have a hard time with this. But basically, for every project type other than street outreach, coordinated assessment, and services only, you're required to select 2 performance measures and create benchmarks that are based on your local data. So I'm going to scroll down to the table. So these are the mandatory performance measures in the table that's number 1. So I had selected emergency shelter on the proposed projects. A required performance measure is increased % exits to permanent housing. The performance target is that at least 50% of people exit to permanent housing. The performance target is the statewide target. It's the goal, like the top yay, A, superstar goal. It's not what we're expecting everybody to get to. So this is just the target is the high level goal, so don't be intimidated by that. What you're really kind of concentrating on is the performance benchmark, which is how you're going to get and how you're going to move towards the target. So here you would select, increase by 5 percentage points up to 15 percentage points. Or if you're already at or above that target, your goal would just to be to maintain the current rate. So you're going to select your benchmark for each intervention type that it is required for. So for transitional housing, the target is 80% exits to permanent housing. For rapid rehousing, it's also 80%. Rapid rehousing, the other mandatory performance measure is to reduce returns to homelessness. And I have to tell you that on the application, we said reduce returns to homelessness within 6 to 12 months. Well, we had to change that to within 2 years because that 6 to 12 months measurement really doesn't show you the whole picture, and I kind of figured that out after I looked at all the data. It really was kind of meaningless, so we changed it to 2 years, and that's what we included in the baseline data that we sent everybody. So you'll kind of have to disregard that. That's not current anymore. But the target is still less than 5%. And so on this one, it would be, you'd want to decrease until you get to 5%, or if you're already there, maintain your current rate. So you're going to go through for every intervention type you're proposing and develop a performance benchmark based on the local data that we sent. So the Table 2 supplemental performance measures gives you your options of the other performance measure you can choose for the intervention types you're proposing. So for emergency shelter, like we went over, exits to permanent housing is required. And then you have to choose at least one of these to be your second performance measure. So you could look at your median length of time, length of stay, your average length of stay, or returns to homelessness from emergency shelters. And you would only need to choose one of those. So if you wanted to work on reducing your median length of time or length of stay, you would select, well, what do you want to accomplish over the next year? Do you want to decrease it by 5 days, 10 days, or if you're already at 20 days, you would want to, say, maintain current rate. So this is the table where you choose the supplemental performance measure for each project type proposed. So I'm going to, all of the balance of state counties in Yakima received their local baseline data. Looks like this. If you didn't receive this, you should email your program manager. And it gives you your where are you at information so that you can fill out that Form D, you know, so it's realistic for your community and for your intervention type. So on this spreadsheet, the green cells means that the statewide target is being met. So you can see there's a lot of green already, so that's great. So if you're choosing exits to permanent housing, or you're selecting emergency shelter, and you are working on your exits to permanent housing, and you're already at 100%, which this community is, you would just want to maintain your current rate on that one. So any of the green cells will tell you that you've met the target and you want to maintain the current rate. If they're white, then you need to figure out how you're going to make some improvements on that. The gray cells where it says NA means that there is no, that project type is not available in your community according to HMIS. So if that's not right, also email your program manager and we'll figure out what happened with that. Whoops. Are there any questions on the performance measures tab?
Oh boy, do we have questions? Okay.
Good.
You ready, Em?
Sure.
Here we go. Attach. Does that mean attach? So we're talking about the system-wide performance measures that are already established.
Yeah.
Does that mean attaching to the email submitting the application?
Yes.
Okay.
Please do that.
Great. Another inquisitive viewer asks, what does has your homeless crisis support system adopted HARF measures mean? Is that a formal adoption by our agency or program staff using these to evaluate data?
It'd be a formal adoption system-wide throughout your county. So in counties that are COCs, most of them already have formally adopted their system performance measures and have targets that they're working towards, and they're often in subcontracts already. So it's a system-wide established performance measures.
Great.
Not using them, not programs using them, which is great, but this is the formal adoption of them by the entire system.
We don't want to talk about the scope of work. Do we want to talk about and how they will be in the scope of work and they will be required to put them in the scope?
Yeah, let's get through the questions and then we'll touch on it.
Crystal asks, are we supposed to start with the baseline data that we received the other day? The answer is yes, you are. Another inquisitive viewer asks, what if we are looking at 2 hearth measures regularly, but not all of them?
Well, if they are established system-wide, you should submit that documentation. We're not looking at all of them.
Yeah, good answer.
That's okay. Submit what you have.
Are the benchmarks only for CHG funds?
No, they apply system-wide because they're system performance measures, but they would only be, so when they're measured system-wide, but they would be in your CHG statement of work is where this will end up. So for the lead who chooses, emergency shelter increased by 5 percentage points over the baseline, that would be in the statement of work. That would also need to be included in subcontracts, but it could be more flexible. So you can, if you go up on this page, there's an example of how you could do things differently in subcontracts. So if you are, say, system-wide, your emergency shelters are exiting people to permanent housing at 40%. And then if you look down deeper, you as the lead could see that, well, this shelter is exiting at a 20% success rate, and shelter B is exiting at 80%. So in your subcontracts, you wouldn't necessarily put the same thing. You would, the high-performing shelter would say maintain current rate, while the shelter that needs to make some improvements would have a different expectation in the subcontract. So you can be more flexible and creative and really get into the weeds in your subcontracts, but what you put in this application for your system-wide measures are going to be what's in your statement of work. And also remember that this can change through the amendment process. So if things are not, going as planned, or there was a bunch of data quality issues, and who knows, things, we can change what the targets are in the contract.
Great. So you just addressed a couple of the next questions, and then comes the question, are the baseline numbers based on the CHG subgrantees or all providers in the whole housing crisis response system?
So the baseline data is all of that project type in the system. So it's system-wide data.
CHG funded or not?
Yes, anything in HMIS. And if you would like, your program manager can email you the reports. So the report that was used to get this data is the HUD Systems Performance Report, which is, based on HUD reporting specifications. And what we did is basically filter it by project type. And we can send you those reports if you want to know which programs were included. They are listed at the bottom of the reports. So if you want to look at those so that you can see exactly what programs are included, your program manager can send that to you if you have concerns about that.
And Kirsten also asks, are non-identified clients taken out of these equations?
I'd have to look at each performance measure for that, because I think that some are included. It depends. Unidentified records are not included in returns to homelessness. So I don't have that information in my head at the moment, but I can follow up with you on that. And it's just the HUD reporting specifications, so we just have to look at that documentation in more detail. So I'll follow up on that.
So next, I think from Matt Davis in Spokane, a couple of really good questions. For returns to homeless, the System Performance Measures report gives you those metrics by intervention type and system-wide. Should we use the baseline from the appropriate intervention type or the system-wide measure?
You should use the base. I would think the baseline for the intervention type, because different intervention types might need more work than others. But I suppose if you wanted to use the system-wide percentage for each intervention type, you could if it made sense, but you will have to show us your performance measures for each intervention type.
Okay. And then Matt's next question and the final question is, we include these measures in our sub-grantee agreements, but we work with sub-grantees to establish benchmarks at the time of contracting. Do we still need to fill out the table since we won't have these benchmarks set yet?
No, you're fine. You're already doing it. So from what that question sounds like, you would have answered yes to one. And in that case, submit your system-wide performance measures that you already have established, and you don't need to complete the table.
One more question. The CHG funds represent a small percentage of funding for our housing crisis response system. What leverage do we have to affect the overall system performance measures?
Well, if you're a county, you have the local funds.
That's right.
To start.
Which makes a significant piece of the pie.
Yeah.
Okay, great questions, everybody. Thanks. Keep them coming. Up next at the microphone is Julie.
I feel like there's something that we were going to touch on with the, I think we got to it. Yeah. Okay, I just need that. Okay, so I'm moving down to Form E, and if you've done this application before, this is familiar. This is just basically saying that the information in the application is true and correct. So this just needs to be printed off, signed, scanned, and then emailed to your program manager with the application materials. And I'm guessing there aren't questions on that, so I'm going to go ahead and move on. And this is new. As it says here, and it says in the beginning of the application, the governor's proposed budget included some funding for street outreach. And at this point, we don't know exactly if this will be included in what's passed in the budget, but we want to be able to grant funds if they come through. And so we have some questions here if your community is interested in either expanding an existing street outreach program or creating a new street outreach program. And there's a minimum threshold for eligibility on this, and that's that in your 2016 or 2017 PIC count, there were at least 20 unsheltered households. And so these questions here are trying to get an idea of the need for street outreach and your community's capacity for having either a new or expanded street outreach program. And that first question says, you know, the number of unsheltered households in the source, and that's where you could put in where you're getting that more than 20 unsheltered. If it's something outside of the PIT count, let us know there, and I mean, that's something that we'd like to know if there's a way that you're seeing unsheltered that you don't think is being captured at the point in time count. And at this point, you know, we don't know if this funding will come through. It might be that we'll have a second tier of applications depending on what we get and what happens when the budget comes down. So they're pretty detailed questions. You can ask your program manager if you need any guidance on this. Are there any questions on this form?
There are no questions on that tab.
Okay.
Next up
is me again. So, right, I think survey.
Yeah.
This is also just something that's going to look familiar to you if you've done the application before, and this is just asking for your input on what the process is like, their drop-down answers for the statements above, and this is just a way for us to collect information. We value your opinion, and I know for myself I've noticed sometimes this isn't filled out, so please take the time to fill it out. All right, Jeff.
Okay. Moving on. So the next thing I want to go over is a topic that's been of some consternation for some of you. So this is the allocation chart, and it's really important to note that this is the estimated homeless allocation, because really of all this money that's listed here, nothing is a certainty except $5 million of ESG dollars, if I'm not mistaken, that are embedded in this $20 million figure. Other than that, until the legislature produces a budget, we really have no idea how much CHG spending authority we have. We don't know if there'll be a set aside for TANF households. We presume we'll get HEN funding pretty much on the same level that we've been having for the last couple of bienniums at around $60 million for the biennium, but even that is up in the air. So much of this is unknown, and we gave you these values as placeholders basically. So what these numbers in column B are derived from are the original CHG funding levels in your current contract as of January of 2016. And if these look low to you on the total column, remember that midway through last year we made some substantial additions to your CHG funding when we got more spending authority. Is that correct? Yeah. Mm-hmm. So these were based on your original 18-month contract, which were shockingly low compared to the contract that preceded that. So that's what these numbers are based on. That's what numbers in column B, rather, are based on. So I guess my word of caution to you is not to put too much stock in these, because it's all unknown at this point. And as soon as the legislature completes its work and produces a budget, we'll know a whole lot more about what this budget table is going to look like. And we will get that information out to you as soon as we have something solid to work with. Questions about budgets?
There are a couple questions.
Okay.
On this allocation chart, what does it mean if there is an asterisk by your county name?
Ooh.
Oh.
What does that mean? Oh,
Is that because it's no contract?
I think it's just Mason, and the reason Mason has an asterisk is that historically HEN funds for this county have been in a separate contract with a separate grantee. That's what makes Mason distinct from all the other counties.
Are the ESG funds also estimated?
I don't think so. I think that $5 million is solid. I would feel much more comfortable when Nick weighs in on that, but my understanding is that that's a known quantity.
Will you give us a budget tool to complete after the contracting, or before the contracting process?
Yes, we will. And as soon as we have a budget for you to actually work with, we'll be getting you both the numbers for your county and the budget tool as well. And no further questions, and that means Stephanie is at the microphone next, talking about system demonstration grants and non-county lead competitive scoring.
Hi, this is Stephanie. So I'm going to talk about something new and exciting that we're doing, which is we're calling it a system demonstration grant. You don't have to do anything extra to apply for this other than fill out the application. We will consider all eligible applicants for this grant, and we will select one or more applicants to participate. Eligible applicants are county governments that have one or more sub-grantee, and we already talked about what this means, have established hearth-based system performance measures in their current subcontract. So that is, if we look back on our Form D, they have to say yes to, if you say yes to both of these and you're a county government with one or more sub, you are an eligible applicant and will be considered for this. There's nothing you have to complete on the system demonstration tab. It's just information about it. We're going to be looking for high-performing, low-risk county leads with robust homeless response systems. We're going to be using information on the application. We're also going to be looking at past monitoring, our own risk assessment,
and we're going to review those HEARTH performance measures that you submit for Form D in making the decision on who to do the system demonstration grant with. It's not additional funding. What it will be is your same CHG base allocation with increased flexibility. So specifically, we will exempt the counties from certain program level guidelines regarding use of commerce forms or documentation standards and specific procedures that we require. So we're trying to remove as much of the program level requirements as we can and really focus on we're funding a system. So that's what's called a system demonstration grant. And I guess sort of what we're trying to demonstrate with this is that for counties that have that are low risk and high performing with their own system, that CHG is only a piece of the funding, that we don't need, that there's no harm in commerce not being sort of in the weeds of your program guidelines. And so we're going to be removing as many of the guidelines as we can. Unfortunately, we can't remove all of them, so we'll still have the system responsibilities for these demonstration grant counties: point-in-time count, coordinated entry, prioritization. The landlord outreach is required in law, so that can't go away, as well as the interested landlord list. If we do have the for-profit set-aside continued, that will still be required. HMIS will obviously still be required. And we will, of course, be looking at the performance outcomes. And then basic household eligibility as far as income and homeless status will still be required. What will be different is we're not going to tell you how to document it and how to recertify and get into the weeds on that level. We trust that you will, do that for your own programs if you're selected for this. Do you have questions on the system demonstration grant before I move on? This is more specific on what sections we're going to look at when scoring it.
There's no questions.
Okay, cool. Well, stay tuned. Also, this isn't really a tab, but I was going to talk a little bit about the non-county lead competitive scoring. So I think Jeff mentioned in the beginning that it is a competitive competition in the situation where the county opts out. So we allocate funding for each county geographic region, and then the county governments are offered the right of first refusal to apply for the funds. And I wrote it down. We had 21 counties that opted in to be the lead grantee, including a few additional ones that are going to be new this round. And then we had 16 counties that opted out. And so in those 16 counties, that allocation is available for any eligible applicants to apply for. So that includes cities, tribes, housing authorities, and nonprofits. And we are actually, something new this year, we're actually posted in newspapers in each of those counties that the funding was available, just to make sure that the information is out there. We don't expect a ton of competition, but who knows what will happen. And so if you, in the past, were a nonprofit lead and the county has continued to opt out, then you will have to apply this year, and it's not guaranteed as in the past we kind of grandfathered the leads in. Applicants are going to be scored on some different sections of this application, specifically forms A, B, and C. Excuse me, A, B, and C. So most of it is coming from this Form A, these questions. We're going to look at the strategic investment section, the crisis response section, the organizational capacity section, and then the section about for nonprofit applicants only. We're going to be scoring all of those. And then we're also going to look at the subgrantee information tab and the and the proposed projects tab. So we're going to be looking at this information in a situation where we get more than one applicant from a county to score whoever gets the highest score to be the lead. Any questions on that? Just a second. Okay. No, there are no questions.
Okay. Well, if you think of something later, you know how to get a hold of us.
So I'm next. You can just hand me that again. So the last tab, let's see, describes the components of a high-functioning homeless crisis response system. And we have this in here. It's a part of the state strategic plan that is now on our website. We have this on here because there are questions in Form A that relate to homeless crisis response system. You know, now we're really seeing this as the umbrella that goes over what our work is, and we're hoping that communities are working towards these types of things. You know, the things that are listed in here are things that you all have been doing for a while: coordinated entry, diversion. And so this is really just something to refer to as you're going through the application. It's informational. And I didn't really have that much on this unless there's questions or anything you all wanted to add.
Yeah, I want to add something on that.
So this seems like a good time to talk about the policy memo that we sent out and some other things that have been published recently. So yesterday or today you received a memo from Ted, emailed from your program manager, that kind of closed the loop on the policy proposals that were sent out to you in September. And so in September we emailed the proposed changes, and then there was a feedback period. We incorporated a lot of feedback into the decisions that we made, and the decisions that we made are documented in the draft guidelines that we sent. Like, for example, that supportive services must be voluntary is something that you can find in the draft guidelines that we sent out. And other more broad policy changes you can find in the homeless housing strategic plan, which was a link in the email that we sent with the policy memo, and it's on our website. So let's pull that out. And then there was one item that wasn't specifically addressed, and that was the requirement for each community to have a highly accessible housing program in 2018. So that's specifically addressed in the memo that was sent out yesterday. And we will incorporate that into the guidelines before they are published. Right now they're a draft, and you can provide feedback on those to your program manager too if you have any suggestions for the guidelines. So those are the kind of all the documents floating around out there and how they connect. So if anybody has any questions about changes in the guidelines, items that were on the policy memo, new things in the homeless housing strategic plan, you can ask about that now too if you want.
And there are no new questions.
Okay. So are there any questions about anything at all on the application? This is the question and answer time period. Oh, someone commented that we are all so awesome. Oh wait, that was our boss. Never mind.
That's the one that counts, right?
Thank you, everybody, for sitting in with us. As you already have been doing, contact your program managers if you have any questions, comments, or concerns.
Oh, there's a question. There's a question.
Oh, a question.
Oh, never mind. No question.
No question.
Does anybody want to ask a question, like, without typing? You could raise your hand and we could unmute you if you have a question. I don't see any, and nobody's typing questions.
Ah, Kirsten. Kirsten, we see now that you've raised your hand and we've unmuted you. Do you want to ask a question?
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. So it sounds like between the potential legislative changes coming and potential changes in who we might select as our subgrantees, we might be submitting this application, as others might, with a lot of information missing. Are you intending then to set a new deadline for when a improved application would be due?
I think, you know, because so much is up in the air with regards to the legislature, I think it's going to be as fast as possible. You know, when we have solid numbers about how much you have to spend, we'll ask you to do your work as quickly as possible and get whatever information you couldn't submit by April 18th to us at your earliest, you know, possible convenience.
Sure.
Yeah, just to reiterate what Jeff said, I don't think we're going to be extending that April 18th deadline. We expect that applications will come in by that deadline that have all of the only things that I think would be missing would be the you know, sub-grantee, and then maybe the funded projects tab will be incomplete, but we will want to see what kind of projects you plan to fund, so estimate as much as you can there, and then obviously we're going to have a separate process for budget allocation when we have the budgets, but we would want all of the information on tab A and all of the rest of the information to be submitted by that deadline.
And then follow-up question. So you're having a requirement that by 2018 an extremely low barrier housing be made available. So if we don't know what that's going to be yet, do we just put a placeholder in there for that?
You mean,
in the proposed project.
We don't know what the program is going to be. We don't know who the provider would be. We don't know what the project is going to be. We don't know what the...
You wouldn't even include it at this point. You don't need to call it out in the proposed projects at this point.
Okay.
If you had it, we just wanted it. It would be good information for us to know if you already had one identified. But if you don't have it, then you wouldn't put anything.
Okay, even though there is a requirement to have it by 2018?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
But we'll check in with you in 2018.
and I'll be checking with you sooner than that.
We'll be working with our grantees way before then, but this is just preliminary information, so if you have something, we want to know. If you don't have something, it's fine. This isn't like the check yes or no for 2018. This is just preliminary information gathering.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, there's another couple other questions. So another question about the low barrier / highly accessible program. Does rapid rehousing count as a low barrier program, or is it Commerce, or is Commerce intending for us to have a low barrier shelter? No, the low barrier program could be a rapid rehousing program. It could be an emergency shelter program in a shelter facility. It may need to be a motel voucher type emergency shelter program. So we're not, dictating the program type, just that there is a highly accessible option in your community. And there was a question, is the primary purpose of the narrative questions on Form A to score communities for the systems demonstration grant? Yes, and to score competitive nonprofit applicants. So it's for both.
And some of the questions on Form A are part of our risk assessment. That's going to, we do for example, the audit questions, we do, everyone has to have sort of a base level functioning before we grant with them. That I mean, it's our no-go process. And then we also use those risk assessment scores to inform our monitoring plan. So it's serving, those questions are serving multiple purposes. If you're thinking, hey, I'm in a community where, I'm not eligible for the system demonstration grant and there's no competition, so why do I need to fill out these questions? You do need to fill them out.
And we want to know.
Yeah.
Other questions?
Nope, I don't see any more questions at this time.
Okay, going once, going twice. Okay, everybody, thanks for hanging out with us, and this webinar will be up on YouTube by the end of the day. Thanks.